Hi, I'm Stephen Goldsmith, and welcome to Homotivation, the podcast for busy, successful gay men and our allies who refuse to put their bodies last. On this show, I sit down with high-performing individuals, creatives, professionals, and entrepreneurs who are not only navigating busy lives and building careers, but they still make fitness a priority, but not for approval or perfection, for confidence, longevity, and self-respect. On today's show, I have a very special guest for you that I am very excited to interview. It is Tony Award-nominated Charl Brown. Welcome, Charl.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Busy, but good. Busy is
You're busy because you're on the road and you're always traveling, and you're traveling with my partner right now, which is...
That's right.
Where are you now? You're in Baltimore?
We're currently with the Baltimore Symphony this weekend.
Amazing. Well, before we get into any of that and your fitness journey and all of that, let's start from the very beginning. Let's start with you and how you got into performing, and then we can go into your nominations and all of that fun stuff.
We got a long journey. Okay. So
it's that. She's got a long career.
Well, it's been a long life. So I'm from San Diego, California, and I started singing in the choir at my church. And so that's really how I got into it. Like my mom and my grandmother noticed, and my dad noticed that I have a talent for singing. So they put me in the kids choir. Eventually I became the choir director of the young adult choir. And so I did that all throughout, from childhood all throughout high school until I left home to go to college. I went to the University of Southern California, USC, fight on, where I got a degree in theater. And I should actually rewind and say before that, though, I spent 8th through 12th grade at the San Diego School of Creative and Performing Arts. So that's really where I got bit by the bug and where I got cast in my first book musical, which was Annie. And I was a chestnut seller in NYC in the ensemble.
You weren't Annie? You weren't the title?
I wasn't Annie. Fun fact, Mrs. Hannigan was played by now Tony Award winner Sada Ramirez. So that's
no way.
We're both from the same
Amazing.
City and same school. Sada, was Mrs. Hannigan in Annie. In the second semester, Sada was Dolly Levi in Hello, Dolly. So those two shows are really like what got me propelled into the theater world, and I found my community there. And I was like, there's other little kids like me that sing and dance, and but that's also when I realized people were making a career out of this. I didn't know that it wasn't just for fun and you could do this for a living. That summer, my parents actually took me to New York City for the first time, where I saw Jelly's Last Jam, which was my first Broadway show with Savion Glover and Gregory Hines and Tanya Pinkins and
small potatoes. Yeah. No big deal.
I even think like Billy Porter was in the ensemble of that, and The Wiz. Andre DeShields was in that as well. So, I had no idea the royalty and the greatness I was witnessing. But what I did see was people who looked like me making a living on Broadway. And that was right when I got into the performing arts school, too. So that's literally when I feel like my world changed for what it is now. So here we are. But so after high school, I went to college at USC, got my degree in theater, did lots of shows. And then right after that, I was living in LA, and I had always wanted to live in New York and move to New York City, but I just didn't have the confidence to do that yet. So I did get cast in a European tour of the musical Hair, where I played HUD, and I got naked in 9 different countries.
Which was your favorite country to get naked in? It was Wolfgang Bosch?
That's right, Wolfgang Bosch Productions.
Because I did Fame das Musical.
Yes, Hair
back
das Musical.
In the day.
Yeah. It's crazy. Also, that's where I met my now dear friend, Adam Lambert, who played Margaret Mead in that production. And we're still really good friends to this day. And also a lot of my friends, I met half of my friends in New York were from that tour. And that's actually the reason why I felt like I could move to New York, because I already had like a support system and people I had met that lived in New York. Half our cast was LA, half our cast was New York. So that sort of helped bridge the gap, those 2.5 years on tour.
You did it for 2.5 years?
2.5 years off and on. Like it worked as though like the first 6 months was Germany. And while we were out in Germany, Wolfgang was able to sell the tour to the Parisian producers. So then we were in Paris for 2 months. And then we were in Italy for, a few months. And then we did Holland, I believe. So that's kind of how it worked. It's like we were doing successful in certain countries, and then we would go home for like a few weeks, and then they'd bring us to other countries. So I got to see a lot of Europe at a very early age, which is great. It was really a dream come true. And I don't know that things like that exist for Americans anymore. I feel like they now cast out of Europe. But at the time, they were bringing us over to do those shows. So it was a special moment. I didn't even realize how special and lucky I was at the time.
Well, we never do until we look back, right? Hindsight's
Yeah,
2020.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah. So, okay. So after that, on and off, you
So
did that
after
for a
that,
couple of years.
I did that for a couple of years. And finally, after getting through my first German winter, I was like, okay, because I'm from San Diego. Like, I don't know about winter. So I was like, okay, traipse into the stage door 8 times a week in the snow with a big coat on. I was like, okay, I guess I can do this. I can move to New York. That was like one of my biggest trepidations.
I don't know if I told you this. I'm originally from Miami.
Oh, I know you're from Miami. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I moved up to New York, I was like, wait, what? I came with all of these turtlenecks and thought that that's what I needed. Turtlenecks. And I wore that's all I did. I went to the Gap and Banana Republic and I got like every turtleneck I could. They were all wool. And then I just remember wearing them and being like, oh, I hate this. And then I barely ever wore them.
Yeah, exactly. No one actually wears turtlenecks that much.
No, because then you get inside and you're like, get this.
Yeah, then you're hot. Or you just get on the subway. It's like you're so in and out. Hot and cold.
Just use a scarf. That at least you can take off. Use a scarf. Which I learned about when I moved to New York. Anyway, continue.
The scarf. Yeah. We used to wear scarves in San Diego when we were in tech rehearsal.
When it would get chilly, I have to protect my cords.
I have to sing. Yeah.
Protect the
I was like, I had no business even owning a scarf in San Diego, California, but there we were with our little tee.
Listen, when I lived in LA and it would get to like 60 degrees or 50 degrees, and all of a sudden I see people in their Montclair and Canada Goose, and I'm like, y'all, I'm gonna need you to calm down. It's not that
I'm gonna
cold.
need you to calm down. Yeah, it's not that serious. Yeah.
Anyway.
So I moved to New York. I made the decision I could move to New York. I had a friend from college who was looking for a roommate at the time that my tour was coming to an end, or my contract was coming to an end on the tour. And he believed in me and was like, you really should be in New York. I feel like you can do Broadway and actually make your dream come true. And I was like, okay. So I moved to the East Village. And, it took me a while. I think the first show that I got when I moved to New York, ironically, was at La Jolla Playhouse.
Uh-huh.
It was a production of The Wiz, which we thought at the time was going to come in and be the revival. But it was like starring my now good friends Titus Burgess and Nikki James and Rashad Naylor, who we're both mutual friends with, who's now a casting director for Bernard Townsend.
That's how you met Rashad, right?
Well, actually, fun story. That's not how I met Rashad. Rashad and I met in Paris. Okay. Because his roommate at the time was in my show, was in Hair with me, and he came from his first vacation from Hairspray to Paris to come visit Nick, his roommate, and that's where we met. So and that was all the way back in 2004.
No, it wasn't. It was last year.
Yeah, it still looks like it was last year, but it was a long time ago, 20 years ago. So but Titus and I met doing The Wiz. Nikki and I met doing The Wiz. That show also starred David Alan Grier as The Wiz. Mm-hmm. It was a really good show, but it was all the way back in La Jolla in San Diego, where I'm from. I got to be home for I think we were there for 4 or 5 months doing that show, which was nice, but it was ironic because it was this is my first big show I booked from New York, and it was all the way back in San Diego. Needless to say, that didn't move in, and I didn't make my Broadway debut with that. It took me a while before I made my Broadway debut. So the next thing I booked that was of note was Jersey Boys, which I know is a show you've done.
What's that show? I've never heard of.
I've never heard of her. Never heard of her. But yeah, so I booked Jersey Boys, but Las Vegas. So I had to move to Las Vegas for a year. It was a year contract. However, another one of those situations like the Wolfgang thing, that contract doesn't even exist anymore. That casino contract was amazing. It was a production contract, which is full Broadway salary plus housing plus a car stipend. And they fed us on 2 show days because the turnaround was so quick. So it really was this beautiful contract that is no more because they don't even bring, Broadway shows to Vegas like that anymore. I mean, this is back in the day when they had Lion King there, Phantom of the Opera, Jersey Boys, stuff like that. Mamma Mia, yeah. Jerry Mitchell had that really cool show, Tease, I think it was called.
Yeah.
So it was back in those days.
Yeah.
So after doing that, I lived there for a year. They wanted me to renew, but I hadn't made my Broadway debut yet. And so I was like, I'm going to move back to New York and continue to give this a shot, especially now that I have this credit. So a couple years later, actually the next year after that, because I was auditioning, I finally got my Broadway debut, which was Sister Act, the musical, which was amazing, starring Patina Miller. And I understudied Chester Gregory, who was the love interest, Sweaty Eddie, and I also understudied Damon Green, who was TJ, one of the thugs in the gang. But it was a really cool time because I was like making my Broadway debut after all those years, and in a great show. Whoopi Goldberg produced it. It was a really cool project to be a part of. But the funny thing is, I can't remember if it was right before we opened or right after we opened, but I hadn't gone on yet for the leading role, and Jersey Boys called me to come to Broadway, and I decided to not leave because I wanted to make my principal debut in Sister Act, because as you know, the track in Jersey Boys is not a principal track. So I wanted to, have the opportunity to move up into a principal role on Broadway in Sister Act. So I stayed, and I did the whole run of Sister Act. And once that was finished, they called me again to come do Jersey Boys on Broadway, just to be a fill-in for a vacation or a medical leave or something. And I came and I did Jersey Boys on Broadway. So that was my second show on Broadway. But at the time, I was doing the workshop of Motown the Musical during the day.
Which is very important because
that then led to the show where I did earn my Tony Award nomination for playing Smokey Robinson in Motown the Musical. Can't even believe it still. So yeah, that's sort of that's part of my Broadway journey. But while I was doing the workshops of Motown the Musical, before we started the Broadway rehearsals, actually, I met now my brother, one of my dearest friends, one of my one of the singers in where I am now with the Doo-Wop Project. Dominic Nolfi was in Motown the Musical, the original Broadway cast. He also was in the original Broadway cast of Jersey Boys.
Which is funny because you two never crossed over on.
We hadn't crossed paths during the Jersey Boys world, no, because he had left the Broadway show by the time I had come in. So we met during the workshops of Motown, which, by the way, I was doing Motown all day, rehearsing for the workshops, and then doing Jersey Boys at night while I was doing Jersey Boys. So that was exhausting.
I don't think people understand what that is to be, because people say all the time, oh, well, you're doing a show. All you do is work a couple of hours at night. And you're like, that's not the way any of this works. Not to mention the
auditions.
Yes, the auditions, the going to coaching, is the running around New York City, the taking acting classes and preparing for the auditions. And the understudy rehearsals and the press events. And then you throw Motown rehearsals on top of that.
On top of all of that, right. It's a lot. But, luckily I was a little younger then. I would still do it now. I call it double duty. I love it. I'll rest when I'm dead, I say. But it was definitely a challenging time, but luckily I was up for the call. So anyways, that's where I met Dominic Nolfi. And at that time, he had just started this group called the Doo-Wop Project. And when I actually first got into the group, I was a sub, because two of the guys who were in the group, who were no longer in the group, both were playing Frankie Valli. One was a 2-show, one was a 6-show, Frankie Valli, Dominic Scaglione Jr. and Jared Spector. So I would cover for one of them because they couldn't both miss show. If we got gigs, they couldn't both not be at Jersey Boys. So that's kind of how I got into the group. Then there was a lineup change. Jared Spector was no longer going to be in the group and go off and do his own thing. So I was invited to come be a permanent member of the group, also because it was right when Motown was starting. So we sort of rejudged the idea of the group to include Motown and all that music and stuff. And so that's when we started the group as we know it now. And that was in 2014. So that's been a long time.
Is it really? Okay. See, this is where my brain just explodes, because I cannot believe how much time has passed. And listen, I'm sure another 20 years will pass and we'll be like, what the hell were we complaining about then?
Right. Yeah.
Right. We still had so much more time ahead of us to do some amazing things. But my brain is like, oh my God, the best years of our lives are over.
I know. Those were some really, look, it's all been good. Mm-hmm. We're still in our prime. But when we were young and dumb and didn't know any better, it was really fun.
It sure was. Well, speaking of, being young and dumb and being able to run yourself kind of ragged, right, into the ground by just, to your point, not sleeping until you're dead. So how did you manage to do that, but still stay present and have enough energy?
I come from an athletic family, first of all. My dad was a high school football coach. He just retired last year. And both my brothers and my dad and my uncles were all high school and college football stars. So I really have that sort of work ethic and drive to just be physical. So
did you play football at all as well?
I never played sports. No, I played baseball. I played baseball.
You played sports ball?
I played sports ball. There's a funny family story though. My dad tried to put me into football when I was a kid, 7 or 8 or whatever, whenever you start. And they told us to run 4 laps around the track, and I like ran 1 lap and hopped the fence and went over to my dad's practice field. But
you were the different child.
I was a little different, but I did have a talent and a knack for baseball, which actually paid off for me in the end because Motown won the Broadway softball league the year that I played.
Hey.
So like it all came full circle eventually. But to answer your question, like I guess I just got the drive because I realized I was living my dream, and like there's nothing like finally meeting your goals and being a part of that. So I just didn't take it for granted. And I was like I said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. This is what I've been wishing for my whole life.
But
let's just do it.
What did you do, though, to keep yourself active? Were you really conscious at that point about what you ate, about working out, about exercise to support that? Or were you just kind of running on empty?
No, I mean, I will say that was probably the time where I started to pick up what are now my like habits and routines. But, a lot of what I do today is also an answer to aging and like trying to sustain, because then it kind of was a lot easier and it came naturally. But I've always worked out ever since I think I started working out in college. So and also in high school, 2 days a week we had dance. 5 days a week we had dance, 2 days ballet, 2 days jazz and tap. So I think by being a dancer, I naturally have that, physical ability, and that's part of like how I keep myself going. So I've always had I've always been leaning towards athleticism. I think that it runs in my family and it's part of my makeup. So I think that's what has kept me going. But it wasn't until I really hit like my mid to late 30s that I started to also couple that with the way I eat and what I put into my body as well. So I think that's kind of how I sustain now. I don't think that that's what I was doing back then. I probably was just eating and drinking anything I wanted to. Now I'm much more conscious about what I eat.